Hey there and welcome back to NBA 2K17. My name is Pete and today we complete the first year of NBA 2K17's MyGM or MyLeague mode with the Oklahoma City Thunder. The Thunder are without a doubt the team of Russell Westbrook. After the departure of Kevin Durant last summer, Westbrook has taken over and he has put out one amazing statistical performance after the other. His support cast has often been described as lacking, but there are some very solid young players on the Thunder who, if given time and a role to grow in, could form a decent roster. For the moment, however, things depend more or less exclusively on Westbrook, so he is the centerpiece to build around. For a more detailed look, let's go through the roster position by position. With Westbrook, you of course have an easy choice for the starting point guard position. His backup is likely going to be Norris Cole, with Kristen as the third option should anybody get hurt. Despite a somewhat disappointing season, Victor Oladipo is still a lock as your starting shooting guard, especially with an $84 million contract extension coming up. His backup in 2K is Andre Robertson, but he works much better as a small forward, so you should get familiar with Alex Abrines, who is one of the better shooters on the team. Oladipo is also capable of playing point guard for stretches when Westbrook sits, which might drive his minutes even higher. For the small forward, you have a variety of options. If you go simply by what 2K gives you, both Jerami Grant and Doug McDermott could start. Grant is a more defensive-oriented player, while McDermott is a very good shooter and is more of a help on the offensive end. Both Josh Eustace and Kyle Singler are a level behind Grant and McDermott and will probably not crack the rotation as long as the other two are healthy. That, however, still leaves us with Andre Robertson, who, even though he's listed as a shooting guard, might actually be the best option for the starting small forward job, but I'll get into that later. For the power forward, the Thunder currently have Taj Gibson, who's on an expiring deal. I feel like 2K has been very generous with Gibson's rating, but that is another discussion. Despite him already being a solid starter with a 78 overall, it might make sense to give the starting job to Enes Kanter, who's currently listed as a center. This would leave you a bit thin at the center spot, but Kanter works very well next to the more defensive-oriented Steven Adams, and his rating is also better than those of any of your other big men, except of course for Adams himself. If you want to keep Kanter at the center as Adams' backup, then you can of course give Gibson the starting spot with Nick Collison as his backup. The only big man we haven't talked about now is Domantas Sabonis, who might be able to crack the rotation in a year or two, when his rating has increased a bit and Collison's contract has expired. Speaking of expiring contracts, with Gibson, Robertson, Collison and Cole, 4 of your role players, and maybe even a starter, expire, and while none of them has a truly critical role on the team, their departure might leave a hole in your rotation. Especially Andre Robertson is someone to keep an eye on, but he will become a restricted free agent anyway, so don't focus too much on him for now. The Thunder also have 4 team options coming up. For Grant, McDermott, Kristen and Eustace, you have a decision to make once the offseason comes, and at least Grant and McDermott are good enough to offer them their options. But both Kristen and Eustace are also still very young and have room to grow, and their options are fairly cheap, so you can also bring back all 4 of them. And while we're talking contracts, let's also talk cap space, as the Thunder are one of the few teams with a bit of cap space going into the 2016-17 season. The $6 million they have available might give you a bit of flexibility this year, before the contract extensions of Steven Adams and Victor Oladipo will reduce your cap space by quite a bit. So despite over $15 million coming off the books, the Thunder's cap space situation will actually be significantly worse next year, which means you should be extra critical when evaluating your players' contracts. Let's now have a look at draft picks, and apart from the 2018 first rounder, the Thunder own all of their first round picks. The 2018 one will go to Utah if it falls outside of the lottery. If it does not, then Utah will get the 2019 first rounder, but once again only if that one falls outside of the lottery. The whole thing continues until 2020, and if none of the Thunder's picks have fallen outside of the lottery by then Utah will get both of OKC's second rounders in 2020 and 2021. I have to admit though, it seems like not all of those eventualities are part of NBA 2K17, so for the sake of simplicity, let's just assume that you'll have to give Utah your 2019 first rounder if the 2018 pick is in the lottery. And with that, we are now at the point where we ask ourselves our 3 key questions that need to be answered before going into year 1 with the Thunder. Question number 1, what is your frontcourt rotation going to look like? And this decision might be the deciding factor for who you want to target in trades, the draft, or free agency. If you decide to play Enes Kanter next to Adams at the power forward, then your starting frontcourt is probably going to be fine for now, but you might have a rather large hole at the center since Sabonis might not be ready to play 15 minutes a night here. If you decide to bring Kanter off the bench behind Adams, then you solve that problem for the moment, but you might face another one soon. With both Gibson and Collison in their 30s and expiring, the starting job at the power forward is definitely not occupied with a long-term solution. And that means a solid power forward becomes a priority sooner rather than later. Question number 2. How strict are you going to be when it comes to contracts? As I mentioned before, your salary will increase by a lot thanks to the extensions of Adams and Oladipo and the fact that you also still have to pay the superstar contract of Russell Westbrook. Under these circumstances, the rather smallish contracts of Alex Abrines and Carl Singler might actually hurt you by putting you above the cap. At the same time, you can also make the argument that maybe Oladipo himself is slightly overpaid, especially since you are currently not in a position where you have a lot to lose. And question number 3, do you want more shooters? If we look at the lineup in OKC, most notably at the bench, we can see that the Thunder don't really have too many great shooters. That might become a problem depending on your playstyle, especially since the Thunder are going to be a one-man show with Westbrook for a lot of games. I know that many Thunder fans won't like the comparison, but look at what Houston is doing with a very similar situation. They are surrounding their superstar playmaker with a ton of catch-and-shoot specialists, which opens up the paint and creates high percentage opportunities, whether the defense collapses on Harden or stays on the shooters. This is an approach that might work as well in Oklahoma City, and if you begin to feel that your team is simply not dangerous enough from the outside, then feel free to add some firepower. Now for the untradables, well, obviously you don't want to trade Russell Westbrook, I think that goes without explanation. I have also put Adams, Kanter and Oladipo on the list simply because I don't want to make any high-profile moves in this series. But if you feel like their contracts are maybe a bit too high, you can of course trade anybody you desire. Also, if you change Andre Robertson to the small forward, his rating is probably high enough to add him to the list as well. And that's actually the first thing we do before even going into the 3 moves. With the change to small forward, Robertson gets an insane 4-point rating boost and he should now be more than deserving of the starting small forward spot. Keep in mind though that this will also drive his market value up a bit, so if you plan on offering him a large contract extension, his higher rating will be reflected by a few $1 million more here. And now let's get into it. Here are your 3 moves to make in year 1 with the Oklahoma City Thunder. Move number 1, trade Carl Singler. Honestly, this might be the easiest move to make in OKC. There are so many arguments for trading Singler, I feel the decision is almost a no-brainer. For starters, he is the worst player on the roster. Additionally, his peak years are already coming to an end, which means at 28 years old he's already not getting much better. On top of that, he currently has the 6th highest contract value for the 2016-17 season, but he has absolutely zero chance of making the rotation even if 1 or even 2 players at the small forward should go down with an injury. He is simply there to fill a roster spot, and that's definitely not worth a 3-year $15 million contract. Now, sadly, the majority of teams in the league will see that just the same, so his trade value is rather low. Still, you can get a few expiring contracts for him, for example, Udonis Haslem from the Heat, Metta World Peace from the Lakers, Ronnie Price from the Suns, or Elijah Millsap also from the Suns. Who you pick is absolutely up to you, you really can't go wrong here as long as you stick to expiring players. I went with Millsap because he is cheap but still a fairly solid perimeter defender. But don't get your hopes up, whoever you acquire here will very likely not see a single minute of action anytime soon. Move number 2, trade Nick Collison in exchange for a stretch big. While many die-hard OKC fans will be disappointed by the departure of Collison, the Thunder have absolutely zero firepower in their big man rotation. By trading Collison, we move an expiring contract that doesn't really help us much since we will still go above the cap next season anyway. It's also not a huge problem if we downgrade a bit in this move, since whoever we acquire will likely not play heavy minutes. Keep in mind that a 3-man rotation consisting of Gibson, Adams and Kanter is very capable of occupying the majority of minutes on both the power forward and center spots, so we are looking for someone who can step in occasionally and bury a few long-range shots. And trade targets include Sean Long from Philadelphia. With a 75 open 3-point rating, he's not an elite shooter, but he will make some shots if left open, and he's actually a very capable rebounder, especially on the offensive end. Alternatively, Lance Thomas from the Knicks. His 84 3-point rating is pretty nice, but it comes at the price of a rather large contract. After all, there is a reason I decided to trade Thomas in my New York Knicks video, but since you won't be able to make a splash in free agency anyway, his contract might not hurt you as much as it does the Knicks. Thomas is listed as a small forward, by the way, but can be changed to power forward without a large rating drop. Still, I can see why this move might not be for everyone. If you add 2 second-rounders to Collison, you can acquire Anthony Tolliver from the Kings. For $8 million in this and the next season, that is if you pick up his option, he will provide you with an 83 rated 3-point shot as well as a bronze catch-and-shoot badge. At 6'8", he's a bit undersized, but at least offensively he will play more of an outside game anyway, so that might be something you can live with. By the way, apart from 33-year-old Steve Novak and 36-year-old Matt Bonner, there are also no viable options available in the free agency pool, and I would personally not see either one of them as a good choice here. In the end, I actually went with Anthony Tolliver here. While Sean Long has some nice upside, he will only be with the team for 1 year, and Tolliver is a far better shooter that we can keep on board for at least 2 seasons. Another bonus, if we pick up his team option, his contract comes to an end just before Westbrook and Cantor can pick up the player options, and if Westbrook declines and you decide to blow things up, Tolliver's $8 million contract will already be off the books and he won't be a problem in a rebuilding effort. Move number 3, if possible, re-sign Andre Roberson, and if affordable, maybe also Taj Gibson. I think it goes without saying that you want to keep Andre Roberson on board. There are a total of 3 ways to do so. The first one is to offer him a contract extension during the regular season. If he declines, he will become a restricted free agent, meaning you can also bring him back for 1 more year on a cheap qualifying offer. Alternatively, and this is the third option, you can also offer him a real long-term deal now while he is still restricted and bring him back that way. Especially with the Thunder's cap space situation, I am personally not a fan of the qualifying offer. You don't need to save money, and a year later you will have the same problem again, only this time Roberson will be an unrestricted free agent. So if he is willing to sign an extension, lock him down during the regular season. Keep in mind that if you change Roberson from shooting guard to small forward, his rating will rise accordingly, and that also has an impact on his willingness to sign an extension, as well as the amount of money he asks for. If you make the switch, then more often than not he won't be willing to sign anything before free agency starts. With Taj Gibson, things depend a bit on how much he's asking for. At 31 years old, he's not the youngest player, but maybe also currently a starting power forward that you don't want to lose. If he's willing to re-sign for a moderate salary, then feel free to lock him down here where he's probably a bit cheaper than in regular free agency. However, if you're starting Adams and Cantor side by side for example, then Gibson's role won't be that crucial and you can likely live without him. And that pretty much concludes things. Depending on your regular season luck, you may or may not make the playoffs. Westbrook is a heavy favorite to win the MVP award, and you can enter the offseason with a few holes in the roster to fill. But be it the draft, your team options, or free agency itself, there are no real high-caliber free agents coming from your team this season, so don't worry about accidentally ruining your franchise. The only player I would prioritize in the offseason is Andre Roberson, unless you have already brought him back earlier. Then for the next season, your roster will likely be not much more competitive than in the previous one. You can continue to upgrade the team and develop your young players, and then anxiously await the decision regarding Westbrook's player option. I wish you all the best of luck with that, and as always, feel free to let me know what you would do with the Thunder in MyGM or MyLeague mode. Also, if you like this video, hit the thumbs up button or support the channel and subscribe. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time. Cheers!